Hey, this is Alan Powell from Anthem Lights. You're listening to Dispatch Radio.
We've been promoting the song. It's a great new faith-based film coming out September 26th. It's a film that I've already told you how much I loved, and we're great to have the creator with us, Richard Ramsey. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I want to jump right into the developmental phase of this and give everybody a little insight, because obviously it's based on, it's got a lot of inspiration from the Song of Solomon, Ecclesiastes, and that kind of thing. But right. The creative process itself, what was the thing that you kind of wanted to bring together, and how was that sort of, lead to the script being manifested?
Well, City Hill approached me a few years ago about this project. They felt the time was right to do something inspired by the Song of Solomon that would speak into the issues that book addresses, the romance that leads up to marriage and the romance that should continue into marriage, and physical intimacy, which is also, obviously a cornerstone of married life. And so as the writer-director of the project, I just started studying things, anything in the biblical text affiliated with Solomon. So, the biographical accounts in 2 Samuel and 1 Kings, and through the wisdom literature like Song of Songs and Proverbs. And I got to Ecclesiastes and was really blown away by what I read there, largely because of things I was going through at the time. And I felt that was just sort of it just addressed a very foundational issue of, I think the most foundational hope you can give a person is that their life has meaning. That's kind of the hope I think that's the hope that all other hopes are built on, I think. And so I was really determined to incorporate that book into the storyline as well. And then, once we decided we were doing Song of Solomon, it was decided early on that the main character's life should be parallel to Solomon's in some way, but we were not sure which way to go about that. And then I guess a couple weeks later I was dancing with my daughter, who was a baby at the time, to a song by Bob Dylan on our iTunes, and I just kind of had this image hit me in the head of, a guy and a girl on stage singing together, and I just kind of thought to myself, well, it'd be really great one day to make a music-driven movie, and it just kind of hit me. And then I guess 2 minutes later I was in the kitchen talking to my wife, and I was like, what if Solomon were a singer-songwriter, and what if he actually wrote a love song like the Song of Songs to his wife, and that's what made him famous? And then once he's famous, he's faced with the same temptations that Solomon faced, and he succumbs to the same temptations to which he succumbed. And it just kind of, several story beats clicked in a row, and so I kind of felt like, we were onto something with that, and just sort of went from there.
Absolutely, and definitely shows. I mean, the story moves very quickly, folks. We talked about the music. I kind of teased Alan Powell a little bit. I said, this isn't his style of music, but I think he could jump to Americana and make a great album, so he needs to consider that in the future. If it feels like he hits a dry spell, he's got it in, because it just seems so natural. And when you went to casting, or you went to try to manifest the vision that you just talked about, so is that who you started with? Did you start with the singer first? Is that how you wanted to approach it?
Yeah, I've really, we've been asked that before about, was it, did you want singer first, actor second? And I just always answer the question, or similar questions, with yes. I just wanted someone who could do both really well.
Right.
And so with the casting process, it was basically the standard audition process. At this point, looking back, I kind of say, well, I didn't know any better than to just try to find the best person for the role, And we saw a tape of him early on, same with Caitlin Nicol-Thomas, who plays the other musician character, Shelby, and same with Allie Faulkner, who plays Jed's wife, Rose. And we saw tapes of them early on, and we called them in. And, with a musician, obviously you're looking for someone who can do the practical things the role calls for: acting, singing, playing the instrument that's scripted. But also you're kind of looking for this swagger, I guess. It's an overused word, but it's, I think, appropriate. And our music producer, Vince Emmett, who did a great job on the music, early on he was like, when he's like, you're looking for someone who has swagger, you're looking for someone who just walks in the room and you feel like they could be famous. And I feel like, if I may say so, I think those people did walk in the room, and they're in the film.
Well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think that was just such a great meld of all the ingredients that you need to make such a vibrant and challenging film at the same time. And you said something, you snuck something in on me there, Richard. I don't want to let it go, because you said that you were, during that creative process, you mentioned how you were going through some things at that time. Could you share with us a little bit about kind of that backstory and how that kind of inspired the story a little bit?
Well, I mean, it gets kind of deep, I guess, but I was, oddly enough, when City on Hill approached me with the project, unbeknownst to them, I was in, basically a literal existential crisis. And as a writer, I know what literal means and what existential means. And I'm using them correctly to say that I was literally in a situation where I was contemplating, like, the meaning of existence. I was, having, like, a crisis of faith. Everything I had believed up to that point I found extremely difficult to believe. And I guess for the sake of time limitations, I can say, my faith has sort of recovered in the meantime. But a lot of the things I was going through, I was, getting kind of depressed and losing, and just having doubts. And a lot of the doubts I had and a lot of the thoughts I had and experiences I was having were in Ecclesiastes. I remember reading in Ecclesiastes, without him, without God, who can eat and find enjoyment? And, I had experienced that. I was really, I was losing weight because I was losing my appetite because I was depressed. And
wow.
I read, there's a text in Ecclesiastes 2, I believe, where he says, who knows if the spirit of man ascends into heaven and the spirit of the animal goes down into the earth? And I'd actually literally asked myself that same question, when sort of contemplating the meaning of life and if there's an afterlife or not. I would think to myself, well, you see animals die and you don't really entertain any notions of transcendence or beyond for them. You just kind of think that's it for them. Why do you think you're any different? And these are doubts that creep into me as a thinking person, as I believe myself to be. And when I see them in Ecclesiastes, it was such a comfort to me, because it was, to me, God's way of saying, these questions you've had are not uncommon, and they're commendable enough to actually be included in the book I wrote.
Yes.
So it was, like I said, just a really comforting thing to me. And there's a quote often attributed wrongly to C.S. Lewis about how we read to know we're not alone. And even though he didn't say it, I love the quote. And I think that I felt when I read Ecclesiastes and the things I was going through, I was like, I know I'm not alone. I know there's other people out there who are wondering what it all means. And I think Ecclesiastes really lays that out in a profound, gritty, and powerful way. And I just felt, I just wanted to explore that. I thought it was important to explore that.
We're talking with writer and director of the song, Richard Ramsey. The film opens September 26th, and I just love the film, Richard. I tell you, the one thing that you captured, it hit my teenage boy right between the eyes, because you reaffirmed something I told him his whole life was going to happen. And that is, you portrayed a scene where you have a loving, committed couple. They're married. They're dealing with a different challenge. In this case, of course, the main character, Jed's traveling a lot. He's touring. He's doing different things away from the home. Mama's taking care of the house. So when he comes home, there's some tension there, because he wants to be amorous and she's exhausted. And where that puts you as a man, and as I try to teach my boys, is it puts you in a very emotionally conflicted place. It is not unhealthy. It's part of being a human being. It's not about you're not Christian enough. But your film starts to go like, listen, you're going to get to this place, and you can easily slide into a very dark place with a lot of regret, guilt, and obviously, as Solomon, a slippery slope to worse crises.
Right.
When you were putting this together, were you afraid this might be too much? Was this part of, we got to go there? I mean, how did this sort of kind of piece together for you?
I guess for me, it goes back to what I said. You just kind of write, trusting sometimes you're not alone, and just have experiences. And then I see it in the text again. I mean, there is this portion of the Song of Solomon where, Solomon comes home feeling amorous, as you said, and the wife says, "I've taken off my robe. Do I have to, put it back on again? I wash my feet. Do I have to get them dirty again?" Translation: I have a headache. I'm exhausted.
Yeah.
and so it's in the text, and so that was part of the motivation for it. And I just thought, I think I've seen enough and read enough of people just clamoring and crying out for faith-based films that just go places that people go in life, and that show marriage. Marriage. I don't want to say warts and all, but I think you know what I mean. Just the gritty and tough side of marriage, because a lot of times Hollywood leaves us at the happily ever after. They leave us at the.
Yeah, my wife always says it's unicorns and rainbows, and says you got to look for toothpaste on the mirror kind of love, right? I mean, you got to look for. There's some dirt and grime in there, and Christians seem to be a little afraid to talk about that sometimes. And I think Hollywood completely misleads the public. So it should be our responsibility as Christian, you as a Christian filmmaker, to say, look, we're not afraid to talk about this, and the film I think does that very well.
Well, thank you, and yeah, we just, I think that you hear, you have experiences in your own life, you hear that experience shared with people you know close to you, and I just felt, I guess, safe that, I wasn't gonna be left hanging out there like I'm the only one, or like the people I've talked to are the only ones. I mean, I think everybody just, it's like you said, it's an inevitable part of life, an inevitable part of marriage is just figuring out, those just that dynamic and how that's going to work and how it's going to work in a way that. The
one thing I want to get to, I know I didn't mean to interrupt you there too much, but I know we're on a little bit of a time crunch here. I want to keep moving a little bit, and that was the music itself. Constantly keeps setting the table. You constantly keep setting the table over and over again, and it's just so well done with the chemistry that you have between Caitlin and Alan in particular. And when you look back at now, was this something that, I mean, let me say it this way: how far into this before you realize, wow, I may have a little bit of lightning in a bottle here as I see the two of them in this dynamic? Because that's really quite what I kept seeing. It's like one little snippet after another. It's like it's a little hard to pick out like some of the highlights sometimes. Like, man, there's some really good meat here.
Right. As far as the music goes, then.
Just that part of it, because there's so much energy and stuff there to enhance the storytelling.
I think we were committed to this genre early on. I'm a big fan of the genre of music. Also was really intrigued by its ability to capture and discuss deeply meaningful spiritual themes in a way that doesn't alienate an audience outside of the Christian audience. I think Mumford & Sons, like the Avett Brothers and Emmylou Harris are a good example of being able to sing about those things in that way. But then I think, to answer your question specifically, I think when we were in the studio recording the music for the film, I think that's when I realized that all the decisions we had made to stay committed to this genre and cast these actors/musicians, that's when I think I knew there was something special happening. Just hearing some of these songs come to life, and I think that's when we started to realize and kind of get a spring in our step about the whole project.
Of the three cast members, the main core cast members, I'm really intrigued by Allie, because Allie really, she'd done Twilight, she'd done some stuff, and the one thing that's interesting about her character is it's such an emotionally exhausting character to watch. You empathize with her so much, playing this spouse who's just screaming for the godly man to stay a godly man, and it is. What did you have to do, or if anything, to help coach that through this process? Because it seems like it's so much, and so it's like how do you stay that heavy the whole time, Richard? And how do you, as a director, kind of help keep her moving that way?
Well, they say, and as cliche as it may sound, it's true. 80% of a director's job is casting.
Yep.
And so we were fortunate enough to find her and just cast a really incredibly gifted actress. And she's so good at keeping a log sheet in her head of the movie, to where she is really good and really conscious about not playing the same story beat twice emotionally. And she's just really good at keeping track of that, and also just taking into account, my feedback as a director. And also a challenge for her was, the beard growth really dictated a lot of the shooting schedule, which put a lot of her heavier scenes up front. So that was like some of her most visceral, challenging scenes were like in the first week or two. So that was another challenge. But then also, just as, I can give really one quick example. Is there's a scene in the hospital, and I remember telling her in that scene, because, we were struggling her and I together through that scene. I remember saying, just don't take your eyes off him. Just lock eyes with him. Because when my wife and I have a heart-to-heart, and I know I've kind of messed up, is when she's got her eyes locked on me. And I think, we kind of found the scene in that moment. But like I said, she's just such a really gifted and talented actress. And one last thing I'll say about that is just that I feel like with all three actors, the audience will feel a sense of discovery, that they're really discovering great actors on the cusp of really prolific careers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I'm so excited. We get to talk to Allie, I believe, later today, and we get to talk to Caitlin tomorrow. We're going to kind of thread all this together with Alan's interview as well, folks. It's September 26th is the song. And, Richard, as you kind of wrap up here, what is the one thing, if you could summarize one big message that you would love for folks to be able to kind of take away from the film?
Well, I think I was very fortunate in that Solomon lays out the point, I think, that he learned through his life in the book of Ecclesiastes. And it basically boils down to remember your Creator, who is the only hope you have that your life has any objective meaning, and delight in the wife of your youth. Meaning is to be found in life in remembering your Creator, staying faithful to Him, and staying faithful to your spouse. And I guess I could just add to that really quickly that I think in our culture it's going to become increasingly difficult to seek after God, but God says you'll find me when you seek me with all your heart. I think for a lot of people to begin that arduous search and persevere in that against the cultural tide, they have to really want it, and they have to really get that He's the only hope, that there's meaning. And I think when they realize that, they'll seek after Him diligently and passionately.
Is it exciting to be a part of kind of a spiritual explosion of faith-based films in the middle of 2014?
It is. It's been such a, and we started this at a time where we didn't foresee.
Yeah, nobody knew when you guys started filming.
Right, and it has been really exciting, and it's not only exciting just from the independent Christian films, but also just Hollywood's interest in it, with biblically inspired or based films this year, and with Exodus coming out and all that. I mean, it's just an interesting time in cinematic and cultural history that there has, 2014 is kind of a landmark year, or has been.
Absolutely. I think this entire year, as I think I've said, it's being defined mostly by this happening in this calendar cycle. So, Richard, one last thing. Any other new projects coming? Anything else you want to plug real quick?
I don't. I have my eye on a project based on a true story, but that's about all I can say at this point. I wish I could share more. I'm chomping at the bit too, but
it's all right. Richard Ramsey talking about the song. It opens September 26th, folks. We're going to have all the links there you've been seeing, the different trailer we've put up, photos, posters, all that stuff, as well as more interviews to come. So, Richard, thank you again for fitting us into your schedule so much, and God bless you, brother. Keep up the good work.
All right, thank you.